Hi, and welcome to MoCDA Talk series. We're in conversation with Jess Conatser, founder and curator at Studio As We Are, a concept studio focused on human interaction and new media art initiatives. Listen to how Jess has curated and developed projects alongside artists, brands, and agencies. Enjoy the talk.
With Jess. Hey, hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm all right. Nice to meet you
Nice to
online.
Yeah, finally in person. Well, online in person. I think we're matching. Got the black
Yeah,
turtleneck memo. Great, easy, safe.
good,
Um,
good.
how are
How are
you?
you? So you're now in London.
Yes, for a while, for a little bit. I'm here, usually in New York City, but in London at the moment. So it's a little bit darker than the New York people, but
Yeah, for sure.
today to uh, prevent any confusion. So how are you? How's it going?
Yeah, it's going okay. Today's been quite slow, but it's nice to talk to you, and these talks are a good way of having something to look forward to and to share with people that are joining us live and watching. So just giving a wave to the people that are here with
Hi
us.
guys.
And yeah, so I was very fascinated about your project. I came to know it when I was in Miami during CADAF, and I've also followed it through social media. And I was really happy, to have a chat with you. So yeah, I think if we can start maybe by, giving a little introduction about yourself, your background, and how you got started
Sure.
with Studio As We Are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've spent the last like 10, 11 years working in art and culture. Um, I studied advertising and marketing and art history, so kind of like a unique mixture, but always knew that art and culture was the direction. And the first, I guess, big like adult job I had was with Milk Studios in New York, and I found myself taking over all of their digital platforms and channels, working with a lot of like social partners like Tumblr at the time, and Twitter, and then Instagram eventually when it kind of like became a thing, and it really became initially it was just about um, engaging people further than just the static imagery, and working with Tumblr really opened my eyes to that.
Mm-hmm.
Through different collaborations, we worked, on a project together called Moving the Still. I think it was like 2013, and it was this first ever gift exam in Miami at like Wynwood, in Wynwood District, and working with a lot of those artists, kind of like, even though my time was small, and just hosting kind of like meetups in the space and whatnot to get different types of like people in to view the space, was just kind of like opened my eyes and got me super curious, and like how we can more so communicate and like work with different types of new media artists to create like impactful content at the time online, um,
Mm-hmm.
to build community. So that's kind of like how I found myself in this current space. Of course, like, really I've worked with tons of different spaces. Like after that, I was at the White House and doing like digital content, um, and working on an online magazine, and creating a lot of like commissions for different like GIF artists and things like that, to develop content around their cultural programming initiatives, that kind of would house like all these really amazing, anyone from like pretty established to like even, iconic talents through, film, art, music, um, literature, that would come and speak to the members there. So it was just kind of a little bit of a roundabout way, but
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily so, because it was always about how can we visually communicate, how can we create a message that's unique. But I always found myself going back to wanting to work with these, different artists who are making, video content, digital paintings, things like that, to really kind of push these different messages forward for the place. So yeah, so that's kind of how I'd answer that question.
And I see that you mentioned on your platform the human interaction and the new media art, time-based art. How do you see that going, in terms of merging the human interaction and the art? In the projects that you've been doing, how have you been looking at the merging of these two elements together?
So I will answer that in two parts. The first part is I'll explain a little bit more about Studio As We Are. So basically, because of the background that I had, I decided that it was time to kind of like take the skill set that I had like created over the 8, 9, 10 years of my career with these companies, and put it into something that could be a little bit more niche and specific. So Studio As We Are was created to really develop community building activities in collaboration with different new media artists and cultural partners. Because at the end of the day, brands and spaces are constantly tapping me to be like, hey, what can we do to build community? What can we do to activate these spaces that we have? And so it kind of became more and more evident, like I think this kind of found me as much as I found it, that, this type of work could be the most unique type of work that I could play with and discover through like different test and learn initiatives that really came from the ability to find these amazing partners online to work with. And so last year we started with a project called, I guess it really came about like 2 years ago, called Decode Experiential. And it was, really created in collaboration with a space that specializes in 360 projection mapping. So taking this like online content that I was always very much focused on and pushing it into a more experiential space to kind of to see it, to view it in like a larger than life kind of like factor allowed these artists who are used to seeing their work on like their, Instagram on their phones in this bigger like real life space. And I think I'm going off topic a little bit here, but it got really exciting to be able to do that, but also then create a panel series around it to discuss, all the challenges, but also forward-thinking solutions with like experience-based and time-based media, while like sitting in an experiential space, viewing it while we were talking about it. So I think that was kind of like one of the bigger series I worked on last year. What was the other part of your question before I completely...
How do you merge, how in your experience you've been merging time-based art to the interaction, like the human interaction?
Yes.
What I think might be useful to touch on is how do you see, because we mentioned online spaces and physical spaces, and it feels like the element of the space, whether it's physical or virtual, has a strong impact in the way that people interact with time-based art. So I was quite curious to know, how do you work around works that maybe is born on social media or on a platform, and then you take it into the real world, even if it's on a screen? What's the impact that has on the audience?
Right. Well, I mean, gosh, there's a few things. The way that I think about it is, online, it's great. It's interactive. It's pleasant. It's very snackable to see, and and satisfying. Like some of the greatest like hashtags come out of that, where you're just like, oh, I'm gonna follow satisfying art all day long so that I can feel like a brain massage while looking at my phone. But I think really the most exciting thing for us was to be able to take those pieces of work and instead of just looking at them on your phone and being like, oh cool, this is like really great content, putting it in a larger than life spaces, and not always having to be larger than life. But if we're speaking about the initial spaces I started to work with, Lightbox, for instance, was 360 projection mapping. It was exciting to view it there because you could really start to view it as more like an art piece. Like you could bring in an artist to then talk about their work in real life, this digital piece of work in real life. And I think that's when the connection started to click. I think for our audience and for myself, even though our audience was very like industry centric, but it was just a very exciting way to not just think about, oh, okay, cool, like, you know, we're working with Rio and he does a lot of these really great commercial pieces or whatever. But when we look at his work and talk to him as the artist that he is, and he explains like his process, you can really start to appreciate it more. So I think that's why it's so important to get this work and time-based off smaller screens and see excerpts, if not like full pieces, and kind of like dissect them more to understand like the technique behind them. And I think that's what bringing this work outside smaller screens offline, even though we're still viewing it like on with projectors or with screens, LED screens, or you know, like LED panel tiles or whatever. It's still just a completely different experience, and it's much more interactive. So that human interaction piece, I think, becomes huge because you know, it really is so incredibly immersive. So you for me, like I'm always awestruck by viewing this work in you know, various like various different, you know, spaces, and every time we work with a new space, it presents a new, you know, canvas and a challenge to create like how that's going to work, or what we're going to do to make it happen. So yeah,
for sure. I think it's very interesting to see how people respond to something that we're so used to browse through a tiny screen, and then when you stretch it onto a bigger surface but still keeping that interactivity, you know, everything becomes bigger and immersive. So in a way you become part of that work without even realizing that it's still perceived through a screen, only larger and into something that is more real, perhaps. So I was, you know, I was interested in this concept of having IRL and URL and how these two spaces communicate, if they communicate, you know, if we can bring the real world into the virtual one and other way around.
Right.
In terms of reproducing these worlds, you know, I think in a way there is a sense of reproducing what we see in the real world into the digital world, but that doesn't always work, right? Because some works are not meant to be put online, whereas some other works are born online. So I think taking them out the water in a way, you know, will make them die, or perhaps will give it a new life. So I was curious to know from you, from your experience, on how do you see the internet, you know, the online world being a space that can be like a blank space, like a white canvas that you can draw whatever you want on it and make it, shape it as you want, or if the online space has already too much noise, so that makes it difficult for people to navigate and to look at art the way that you perhaps do within a museum or a gallery, you know. How would you describe this pathway of looking through art online versus physical world, so IRL, URL worlds?
Right. So yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think, you know, for me, I am very partial to online. I think it provides so much opportunity, and I think it can also be, like you said, sometimes challenging because, you know, there's in our like average minds and what we like to the average person, or maybe not, you know, I don't know, but for me sometimes you can think of looking at a website or a space online as like limiting, and you want to kind of go out and see things in real life as much as possible, but also on the other side of things, being online and utilizing, you know, that to experience is like also an endless like rabbit hole, if you will. So I feel like the more I work with different types of artists in this space, the more my mind becomes like open and awakens to like new ways of creating like virtual experiences that can be super stimulating and exciting. However, because I spent so much of my career online and creating social media content and interviews and working with artists and things like that, I definitely lean towards the opposite in taking as much of this online work, this moving image work, new media work, offline. And I think, you know, one of the most notable projects or recent projects is for Decode Experiential. We did this series with One Times Square, and that is the building where the New Year's Eve ball drops in Times Square. And over the summer, they were rebuilding their LED screens. So we got this unique opportunity to work with One Times Square to put up artwork by over like, you know, I guess around like 22 artists from around the world on these screens while they were being rebuilt. And, you know, our criteria at the time was just like, look, you know, we definitely want to do that. Obviously, this is a really great opportunity for a lot of the artists that we work with. But, you know, we needed to make sure that it's uninterrupted by advertising. Right, like we made that our requirement, and we were able to like get them to say yes to allowing us, you know, to do that, to make that happen. And so for about like 2.5 weeks, we took over these screens and put up all these different, you know, like 3D animations, generative art pieces, some audio visual, but without the music, because you know, in that space you can't really play sound. Motion graphics, again by artists everywhere, like, you know, from UK, from America, South America, you know, from Russia, like lots of different artists. And it was exciting to watch people realize and like see this work that they usually see on their Instagram account in the middle of Times Square, because you're just so used to seeing advertising there. And, you know, obviously this is more and more prevalent thing. A lot of people are taking over screens in that area and whatnot, but it's still, you know, one spot of like, you know, however big that like screen's loop is, that still is running ads. And so it was a unique opportunity to do that and watch like people just literally stare at the sky for like 20, 30 minutes looking at this artwork. And I think in that way we owe ourselves, or we owe it, we should, like people like me who are producing these pieces to these artists, to find that opportunity as much as possible, because there's an educational layer there. It's not, you know, people aren't going to Times Square to see art, so you're getting this audience that probably isn't as aware, and could, you know, change their perspective or get them to discover something they might not otherwise discover. So I think that's kind of like, you know, for me, it's about creating those more public pieces like offline than it is online. But again, like the ability to find and connect with artists online is really great. And then to interview them and talk about their work and understand their work and be able to even post it on our feed on a regular basis is also something that I value, and is what, you know, leads to all the projects that we do. So it's just always, it starts there. So I hope that answers your question, or at least
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's
that's
all
kind
about
it.
Yeah, how about art can be fluid in a way, you know, and turn into not maybe turn, but be adapt the space, yeah, you know, in a sense, the physical space and the digital space to something that fits with the work, that the artist is happy with,
the curatorial, let's say. You mentioned about collaborations and the way you included so many artists from different countries and parts of the world. So I was interested, how do you, with Studio As We Are, connect with artists and make these collaborations happening?
Yeah, sure. So, gosh, a lot of different ways. I am constantly on Instagram and online, but mainly Instagram. And again, it becomes this like, playground, like content playground for me, where I am constantly searching and looking through hashtags, through other artist accounts that I like, through other, cultural institutions that I like, to discover new partners and artists that I would like to collaborate with. But also, through our Decode Experiential series, we would have the artists that we would invite to speak nominate new artists for us to look into. So I think a lot of
that's a good way.
Yeah, like I really want to talk to other curators. I want to talk to other experiential, like, directors and things like that, and be like, who are you working with? And then also the artists, because they're going to have a much better understanding, in the sense that, they know their craft, they know their skill set and how they're making it. So when they nominate someone, I'm really going to value what they say, because it means that they've really kind of noticed something special about someone, and so then DMing those people, or getting like an email intro and going from there. But I think every single time I work with an artist, a cultural partner, like, Artx Code or Her Visions or CADAF or whoever it may be, I'm always going to be like, who are you looking at? Like, who's most interesting to you right now? And then obviously, like, when we're, out and about, going to, art fairs or museums or whatever, like, definitely going to notice and use that as inspiration to connect when it makes sense.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was also curious about, you mentioned about the advertising and the marketing part of art. So and from your background as well, there's a lot of art that I think is hidden behind these banners or marketing spaces, whether it's online or offline. Also, I'm thinking about video games or the film industry. There's a lot of work that people do behind the scenes, and then it comes out as the outcome is something that the work that you do as an artist is included, is part of, but it doesn't really stand out most of the times, because it becomes part of something else. So how do you think that art can be valued and can be perhaps taken into a space of its own?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So for a long time, I worked on a lot of branded content pieces, and I kind of found that get stale after a while, because I feel like it's great if you can really connect and find a unique concept behind it to make it happen. But for me, it's, every time I work on a new project, and if there's brand involvement, it's more like, how can we create a partnership where the brand is more like a modern day Medici than a, like, let's put our logo on art piece and claim it as like our own or whatever. And obviously that's like super, like, hopefully no one's doing that exactly. It's a very basic example, but I think getting this work again offline as much as possible. Obviously we can't do that currently right now, time that we're existing in, but getting it offline and again appreciating it in a setting that feels like more lifelike. It's, I think, again, even if you see like a Picasso piece on your Instagram account, it's like much more exciting to go to a museum and see it there. So again, it's just creating these instances where we can appreciate this work and look at it and click it up and get like a more like a higher res like, render of it. Or even some of the artists I work with will be like, oh gosh, people don't even get to actually see my work because it's algorithmic and it's infinite, and I only render out like a tiny piece of it, and so then they're only seeing this like one aspect of it. So like the more that we can talk to these artists and be like, how does this need to be seen, like how can you view this? Like I think that's the secret, is like asking the artist how it's meant to be shown, and then also that allows us to then look at this type of work more as artwork. It allows us to like put it in the same category as like other works that are already just like trained for us to know like this is beautiful artwork that we go to a museum to see. So yeah, it's I think it's just retraining people as much as possible. And
yeah, I think it's a lot about the education that we provide, and we have a comment coming through. I don't know if you want to read it or
yeah. I'm looking. Hey, thanks for sharing. Okay, so you're wanting to know, do we have a funding model to be able to make and create its creative projects? And if we can share more. So I try as much as possible to work with different real estate companies and things like that, and other partners who would have a budget to make things happen. A lot of the time it's spaces donating screens that they have, or different brands that are working with a space on a regular basis. They need an activation, so there's funds there that can be put towards a project that I want to get off the ground. So it's really a case-by-case basis. I do work with a lot of the clients to come up with commissions as much as possible. For example, there's a space in New York that I'm working with to develop a residency-like program for, and in that case, there will be like, artist honorariums and things like that for us to be able to make this happen. And so I have no set model as of yet, but I find that the more planning that I do, and the more collaborations I create, and the more pitching I get to do, we're slowly finding something that works a little bit better than before. So yeah, to be transparent.
Yeah, I think where all these projects is a work in project, is a work in progress. You start something out, and then you learn as you go, and you learn from every show you do online or in locations, and with partnerships that you make. So from my experiences, that of course if there's a budget is better, but you can also find ways of building something that is bringing forms of rewards to artists and creators and people that work together. So I think
also, I just want to say one thing to that too, like this popped in my head, but a lot of the companies that do have the budget for these types of projects aren't necessarily completely comfortable with these types of projects yet. So it's kind of like, again, working with them to create case studies, like a proof of concept every single time, so that they can then build budgets for this for the year. And so I think like every time I work on one of these projects, I get closer and closer to getting a company to really like define some sort of like dollar allotment to these projects, on a yearly basis. So that has been very exciting, and there's definitely hunger for it. And now more than ever, especially since we're going through what we're going through currently, I think it's going to force a lot of brands to realize like they need to spend more time thinking about this space and understanding it. Like if these types of chats, it's like I've been telling people for years, but to get someone to get on Google Hangouts with me a couple of years back to do interviews was like pulling teeth, because people didn't get it yet.
Yeah, I know. I think more and more companies will be looking at assigning a budget to online projects, and to be more inclusive of artists and creatives that work with them. This is something I personally experienced over the past couple of years, and it wasn't such a thing before, or at least only institutions or big organizations could afford such talent, within their programming. So I think it's something that we'll be seeing more and more, but it definitely takes education and
time for them to realize and, show them that proof of concept that is actually something that people need, to nurture art through the experience, both online and offline. So I think what we are currently doing right now, sharing these thoughts with people watching live, is already sort of planting a seed and saying, well, this is actually very much needed, especially during these times. And something I wanted to discuss with you and hear your opinion is, how do you think art, time-based art, will be perceived during these times, the current times that we're living, and how do you see a future around the digital space? What do you think people will be like after what we're living right now, given that we're spending a good amount of time online?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really powerful. Like, I hope that we come out of this changed, we better as a society. But I think this is, for us at least, like, a moment where we can really push again, brands and real estate company or whoever we're working with, like, or we've been targeting over the last few years, to kind of have like a wake up call again. And I think that, people, I think this will be like a new integration of sorts for digital. I think like people will understand that it's more symbiotic than they realize, that it's like a natural thing that will need to just be built into everything that we do. I think will in turn create, again, more budget and more opportunity for people to actually have in front of their mind when they're getting any sort of brand project or like art fair or whatever it is off the ground. They're going to need to understand, what is this digital element? Like, how do we present this in a very powerful way online to connect with a large audience, but then how do we create more space for it to exist like IRL at the same time, so that there's, again, more integration, so it's not so separate. And I think I remember working with so many brand partners, gosh, on like fashion week projects and things like this in the past, and just having to sit there and, yes, like, we're bringing in these artists to create these really great like weaving images and gifs of like models walking down the runway, but just sitting there having to be like, we need to understand what the creative is and what you guys are doing in order for us to like create something just as impactful that that is going to be then something these artists like work on. We can't be this afterthought all the time. So I'm hoping that this will give all the people who've worked really hard in this space for so long, like, that leg up and allow us not to be like, not, I think digital hasn't been like necessarily an afterthought, but it will be even more of a like a thought process. This is just as important, if not more important, because again, like, why, like, let's not, like, at the end of the day, like, everything has been stripped away. We're all basically on lockdown. Like, we're all the same. We're all sitting at home. So it's like let's open, like let's remove these massive paywalls, and like, let's open the floodgates so that more people can like be a part of like, what we're doing. And I think digital is something that allows for that to happen. It breaks down, breaks the walls down. So hopefully that will be something that is an outcome, if I'm just kind of like thinking out loud. But
I think that the accessibility is definitely one of the point that this situation is teaching us. How do we access information and culture and art, and I think what we are experiencing during this quarantine time is that this is kind of the only way to keep us connected and communicate and share anything that you would do, in a physical space, but putting it into a virtual one, which doesn't diminish the value of what we communicate or the meaning of the art we show. It's just acknowledging the fact that situations like the one we are experiencing now can happen. And I think, in human history, We probably haven't experienced anything as such. Maybe generations back, like our grandparents during the war, maybe have experienced something similar to this, where there wasn't the internet, so there wasn't even a way of building this network of communication. So I think we are privileged in a way that the internet has no frontiers. And as long as you can access the internet, you can communicate. I think, we should ought to go beyond this concept as well at some point and become even more connected and discover new ways of communicating with each other. I think the internet is a great start. And for some, it's not even something that is normal, It's something that is still far from accepted as a way of communication, despite the fact that it is one of the only way of communicating these days. So I envision a future where we will really need to rethink the way we as humans interact with each other. And it's not just about the politics of communication, is also about how we support each other as a community. Because I think what this virus is teaching us is that there's no difference, there's no difference in the country you live in, where you come from, who you are, what kind of society level you are. So I think it's the same in art. In a way, art needs to be, accessible.
Yeah.
And I think this way is one way of sharing it in a more accessible way. But yeah, of course, I think is an open question, because I'm not sure what it's going to be like after this quarantine, or when it's going to end, or is it going to change it? Is it going to change people or the system that we've been brought up to? So I think it's quite interesting to discuss it and to explore these dimensions.
Yeah, definitely. I think these are very uncertain times, and we have a lot of, I don't want to speak for everyone, but extra time on our hands. We're at home, and so hopefully this is an opportunity to get extra creative and understand maybe like how we can exist moving forward, and maybe like, I don't want to say better way, but different way, how we can take more advantage of the freedom that we have when we're not all at home. But also I think it's, despite how terrible it is, it's also just a time where okay, let's slow down then. Let's reflect and let's kind of really understand what our goals are and how we go about doing them, and then encourage one another to, like you're doing, connect with the community and talk to each other, because creativity is always better together anyway. So brainstorming and everything is so incredibly important. And get outside of tunnel vision. Or, if you're with the same coworkers every day, groupthink starts to happen even. So it's just I've been challenging myself to connect with a new individual every day through direct message and just saying hi. And things like that, I think, just, to put yourself out there and get other perspectives, a good opportunity to keep your ears open. And
I very much agree with you. I think this is, the world is giving us an opportunity here, and it'll be a shame not to take it. I know it's challenging, it's tough on mental health and on everything, really. It put us on a lot of struggles, but I think keeping it, communicating and sharing what we're doing is essential to keep us going and to stay creative in a way.
Definitely. And even seeing the cultural reaction to what we're going through all the different digital media that's been coming out on a regular basis. I've been having such a great time seeing people's messages about washing their hands and all the toilet paper rolls jumping up and down, and you know, it's just like how we're all kind of digesting like what's going on, and like in I don't know where everybody else is, but in the UK we can't find eggs. So I'm excited to see if somebody comes out with something around that. But it is, you know, also interesting to see like the art that comes out of it, or like during the process. How, you know, how people again are sitting with it and being like, oh my gosh, like one artist created a bunch of virus models that you can download.
Yes, I was going to
Really
mention
cool.
that. I've seen, I'm sure
funny.
you might have seen it as well. There is an artist, I think it's called Webb, and he's made this neon light image of the virus. So it's give it a face and a shape and colors. And then he went around in London,
that's really exciting.
in empty Piccadilly circus, and show it to people. And we had these dancing virus in empty squares, and then this piece was auctioned. And the amount was donated to, I think, to hospitals or, you know, to people that were in need of during this medical, you know, crisis.
Yeah.
So I found it particularly moving because, you know, it's something that normally you would have auction houses or artists donating, but when things like this, you know, bring all of us together, we're fighting something that we don't see, we don't know how it's going to change, and still, in a way, we make beauty out of it, and we try and share it and support each other. So I found that, you know, a very moving artistic exercise in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. More of that, please. I think it's exciting to see how people are just like adapting and quickly kind of coming up with, you know, creative ways to give back to you, like, you know, their fan base, to get like pertinent messages out. And you know, right now we don't do that because people are really struggling. So just the reminder every day that like actually stay home. Actually, you know, we're being called to sit on the couch. We're not being called to go to war. Like, this is okay. Like, we can do this. And, you know, like, I think it helps to show, it helps at least to push the seriousness of the situation. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I unfortunately, I still see far too many people outside, but I'm hoping that, you know, everyone is going to take it a bit more seriously and be responsible for one another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, does anyone? Hey, everyone who's on here. Do you guys have any? Hey, do you have any questions?
I was going to invite anyone watching, if you guys want to share any question with us, we're happy to talk about it. But yeah, otherwise, you know, I really enjoyed talking to you, and I think, you know, what we said about collaborations and the IRL, URL was so fascinating, because to me, when I think about digital space, I always think that, you know, I wouldn't know how to define that. So every day when I do these talks, I'm curious to hear from people what they think of the internet as a space where you exhibit, you see art, you digest art, you consume art, you know. So I really like seeing different people having different you know, impression about a space, that it could in our head be different to all of us, because the way we see it is different. You know, that's our own way of seeing something that is not a physical thing. So you don't come across the internet, you know.
Right.
So you can shape it, you can define it as you want. But in a way, there are limitations that come with it. So I think it's interesting to have that as a restriction, but at the same time, the freedom of pushing that limit to the edge. and experimenting as much as possible. So, and with the fact that technologies are developing so fast, that is also like, how far is it gonna go? So
yeah, now's the time. Now's the time to really sit back and push.
Eleonora says she has a question,
hey.
so we're waiting for the question
Oh, we will answer your question.
to arrive. But yeah, I really enjoyed the space, you know, the thinking of physical space and how we are adapting to something that is more digitalized. I've seen a lot of museums and galleries taking a lot of their collection online, although in some cases I think a lot of museums have been rushing to do so. So, you know, it's not always a successful experiment, but I do appreciate totally that so many people have responded, you know, with speed to the situation. Do you wanna get through these questions?
Yeah, let's see. Okay.
So in 15 minutes, Super Rare will launch the opening of its gallery in this Get Out While You Stay in virtual art experience on CryptoVoxel. Coldy is releasing the link in a while for us to join the opening. Okay, what's your take on this? So I don't know, do you know much about Super Rare, CryptoVoxels, and...
That is not my expertise. No, I would have to look at it a little bit more.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Super Rare is a platform where you can browse and purchase digital art through crypto. And then CryptoVoxel is a gallery that is built like a bit like Minecraft. That you can create your own space. That is very minimal.
I'm releasing a link to join the opening. Okay, got it.
It's very minimal, and then you can build your own gallery within that space. So you can buy this virtual land.
Oh yes. Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that's what it is. And Coldy is one of the artists that has been involved.
Yes, virtual experience. No, yeah, I think that's so exciting. Without trying to sound.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
That was me. I just turned the camera.
Yeah, I want to look into that and check it out, because I think that could be fun, especially right now, because it's can't go out. So, sorry for the lack of knowledge there, but yeah, I think that's exciting to me. I think gaming experiences to connect and sell artwork, I think that's great. Why not?
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope Leonora is gonna be able to share the link with us, and maybe we can go and check it out.
I'll DM you back, tell you about my experience.
Sure.
Thank you for teaching me something. All right, cool.
Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you. I'm now curious to go and see what these is gonna look like. But yes, I think what we've discussed is very relevant, and I hope we'll get to see more and more digital art into the outdoor.
Yes, soon. Hopefully very soon. Hopefully we can continue to do that. But I can't wait to see who else you guys talk to, and I have a few online projects coming up, and I'll definitely keep you guys posted.
Actually, something that you put me in mind now is that I would ask you if you can suggest one artist or a creative within the art space that we should invite to have a chat with us. So maybe have a think, and I'll be very happy to start on this thing.
I'll send you some names. There's a few that come to mind. All right, cool.
Good.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.